from the studios of Clean Fuels Alliance America, this is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast. Authentic conversations with leaders in the biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel industries. Now, here's your host, Scott Tremaine.
And welcome. This week, Clean Fuels contractor and OEM market development manager Jennifer Weaver sits down with Bailey Arnold, Director of Clean Air Initiatives with the American Lung Association, and Pete Probst, President of Indigenous Energy, for a Midwest fleet focus on biodiesel success stories.
All right. Thank you, Scott. I'm really excited to have Bailey and Pete here along with me as well. We've had the pleasure of working together over the years here in the biodiesel and clean fuels industry. So really excited to have them join the conversation. We've been on a bit of a road show here the first part of this year. We have a tendency to run into each other at industry events. We started off at the Clean Fuels Conference back in February in Fort Worth, Texas. I think both Pete and Bailey were with me there and had an opportunity to talk to a whole bunch of different OEMs, or it is original equipment manufacturers, as well as fleets, including the City of New York and Madison, Wisconsin fleet, City of Ames, City of Southlake, Texas, and most notably the PepsiCo fleet joined us there. So we learned a lot in our conversations with folks like that are putting biodiesel to work on the road today. From there, we moved on to our next event was in Indianapolis. We went to the Work Truck Show and Green Truck Summit, sponsored by NTEA. And Bailey and I had an opportunity there to talk with even more fleets. We do a lot of talking, we do a lot of listening, and a lot of learning. And wanted to share some of the insights from all of those conversations with you guys. And this week, we are actually on yet another show here at the National Association of Fleet Administrators, or NAFA, Institute and Expo, taking place here in San Antonio, Texas. And another great opportunity to interact and both share some knowledge as well as hear their experiences. And I think last up we got coming up here this spring, we'll be heading to Louisville for the Government Fleet Expo in May. So always a really busy time of year, but a lot of fun and great opportunity to engage with other leaders in our industry that are helping to share the good word about biodiesel and renewable diesel and their role in fleets. So wanted to just kind of level set the conversation first with why is this important and why are we all chatting about this here today? You know, despite the headlines and what you might hear on the news, EVs are not going to be able to just show up tomorrow and be the end-all be-all for every fleet. There are a whole lot of medium and heavy-duty fleets out there that are still relying very heavily on diesel vehicles and diesel engines. In fact, about 76% of all commercial vehicles in the United States are actually powered by diesel engines and powertrains. If you look at the big Class 8, like over-the-road semi-tractor trailers, 97% of those have diesel engines in them. 77% of transit buses have diesel engines in them. 90% of school buses. And these are big rigs that are doing a lot of work. They're hauling heavy loads across long distances in remote areas on time-sensitive schedules. And those kind of duty cycles just don't always lend themselves well to electrification as a decarbonization strategy. And they tend to stick around a long time. These are very durable engines and equipment, and they're often in a fleet for 10 or 15 years or more. So there's a lot of them out there, and fleets are really struggling with, okay, how do we meet, the requirements of our state and federal legislation or our company objectives, but not have to break the bank on trying to reinvent our fleet. So Pete and Bailey are here to kind of talk through that with us here today, and excited to hear their perspectives about that as well. So Bailey, can you tell us a little bit more about how you got involved with biodiesel? What first piqued your interest in this fuel?
It's really interesting. Biodiesel has kind of been in my blood since before I was born. So my grandparents operated a Phillips 66 station for a number of years. My grandpa was an over-the-road trucker. My dad is a diesel mechanic and early biodiesel enthusiast. I can remember as a kid him making, quote unquote biodiesel in the garage with used cooking oil and a slurry of things back in the Wild Wild West days. So I've really been around biodiesel for a long time. And It's really cool to see that history, and then now how I've been able to work in the industry as a whole and help promote these fuels and just to see the journey from those olden days, the Wild Wild West days to the high quality fuel that we know today.
That is awesome. I love that. I'm sure your family's very proud that you picked up the torch and ran with it there. So that's really cool.
If you could see my dad's shop, every little bit of biodiesel swag I've managed to make, he's got every one of them.
And you make some really good biodiesel swag, so I'm sure he's got a well-decorated shop there thanks to you. That's awesome. And Pete, can you tell us a little bit more, outside of your involvement with Indigenous Energy, how did you first get involved with biodiesel? What got you interested in working in a more active role, I guess, with the fuel?
I guess it probably started when I was in college. I went to school for engineering and kind of went into environmental science. And so between those two disciplines, I started to realize we've got some problems in the world, and fuels is definitely a way to make them better. And so just kind of got down that path, bought an old Mercedes and ran it on vegetable oil and biodiesel back in the Wild Wild West days, and learned a lot of things about fuels and a lot of things about just running diesels, and kind of went from there.
That's awesome. Well, now we've migrated to the Midwest, not so wild fuel market that is running on very, very high quality biodiesel and renewable diesel on the Wild Wild West now. So renewable diesel
Right.
is another low carbon fuel that we don't see a whole lot of yet in the Midwest, but definitely very prevalent on the West Coast. So we'll probably see some evolution of that into other markets here, and I'm sure we'll be doing another episode on focusing on that too. But really so excited and glad that both of you have made a career out of finding ways to support biodiesel in Midwestern fleet applications. So thank you.
Thank you to Clean Fuels and to the soybean farmers that had invested over these years their checkoff dollars to make this fuel, well, now these fuels, a reality. Without them, we wouldn't be in this career that we're in today, and I'm thankful for them every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really such a great success story here, kind of in the Midwest and Farm Belt, where a lot of these feedstocks are grown and processed, to then be able to use them as, feedstocks for fuel that is making, vehicles and fleets run that much cleaner. So really a great kind of come full circle success story.
Yeah, I mean, it supports the farmers in the community that I grew up in, right? Those are my neighbors. And without this industry, they wouldn't be making nearly what they're making on their bottom line today. I mean, this industry has really supported our farmers and continues to, throughout all these years. And I love that story, seeing it support the farmers and seeing it support rural communities that maybe don't have a lot of opportunities. This really shows that success.
Billy, why don't we start off with you? Can you tell us a little bit more about your role at the American Lung Association?
Yeah, first off, happy to be here with you in San Antonio for this great event, talking to fleets about the benefits of biodiesel, renewable diesel, and some of the other opportunities out there. So in my role with the Lung Association, I focus on decarbonizing the transportation sector through the implementation of alternative fuels and technologies. And I have a particular focus on the adoption of biodiesel and now renewable diesel. And really, my role allows me to provide outreach and information to fleets out there that are looking to decarbonize, because there's a lot of information out there that isn't necessarily correct, or there's a lot of folks that don't necessarily know what's going on. And that's where I get to step in and provide that information and help guide fleets to make the right choice for their fleet. And in a lot of cases, that's biodiesel.
That's awesome. Yeah. And, I should note or point out for our listeners that biodiesel and renewable diesel can be used in any diesel engine. So all that equipment that we just mentioned a couple minutes ago can run on biodiesel today. It's a very low carbon solution, and that's why fleets are taking a fresh look at it, because it's kind of the easy button when it comes to, what can you do to decarbonize your fleet. You can put, just a different fuel in your existing tank. And according to the EPA, biodiesel is considered an advanced biofuel. And advanced biofuels are renewable fuels that have life cycle greenhouse gas emissions that are at least 50% less than baseline GHGs from diesel fuel. In fact, B100 or 100% biodiesel can reduce those GHGs by more than 74% on average compared to diesel fuel. So again, just a really easy solution, and your unique experience with the American Lung Association is is also seeing the health benefits that can come from using those lower carbon fuels.
Yeah, it's amazing when I talk about the fact that you can get a 74 or even higher percentage of carbon reduction overnight. You kind of see the light bulb turn on, in a fleet manager's eyes, and like, wow, can I really do this? And that's when you've got them, and that's when you share all this wealth of information that we have from the industry and our personal experiences with the fuel. That's what sells it at the end of the day. That makes the fleet manager make that decision, and it's a decision that they can feel good about. And that's what I love about my job and my involvement in biodiesel.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And I kind of feel the same way. And working, my day-to-day operations are working with the OEMs, the equipment manufacturers, and they're really struggling. They're having to come up with some pretty bold moves to help meet the increasing emissions standards that are coming their way, and again in 2027, continual evolution of their industry to help meet those noble but challenging goals. And the same with fleets. They're just trying to keep up, and so I think our collective mission is to try to make that whole transition as easy as possible for them. So really appreciate American Lung Association's partnership over the years and helping us get that word out for sure. So that's great. I know that both you and Pete have been involved in something called the B20 Club over the years. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program? Maybe first in the Indiana and Illinois space for you, Bailey, and then Pete, maybe pipe in on some additional activities in Michigan and elsewhere.
Sure, yeah. So we actually have two B20 clubs, as you hinted at. So we've got the B20 Club of Illinois and B20 Club of Indiana. And essentially what they are is they're collaborations between the American Lung Association and the Illinois Soybean Association Checkoff Program and the Indiana Soybean Alliance, respectively. And at their cores, basically what the clubs do is that they partner with fleets to recognize their use of biodiesel, renewable diesel, or sustainable aviation fuel. Those are kind of new, renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, but definitely growing and emerging fuels that we're looking at now. We used to be focused just on biodiesel, and we've now expanded. In fact, we onboarded Andretti Global last week in Indiana, and they're using renewable diesel and biodiesel. So we're expanding our view and our focus to include those fuels now as well. But essentially, beyond partnering with those fleets that are out there using it in everything from over-the-road trucks to transit buses to marine vessels, locomotives, anything you can think of that's powered by a diesel engine, we've probably got an example that's running on biodiesel or another fuel. And so we also, beyond that, partner with clean fuel producers, fuel marketers, not-for-profits, and other groups that support the expanded use and production of clean fuels in Illinois and Indiana. And I think, that's kind of inspired some other groups to go out there and start to do the same. And I think, Pete's got a great example in Michigan, and really excited with what's going on up there as well.
Yeah, so Pete, tell us a little more about that. What's happening in my home state here?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first, I just want to say thanks for having me, Jen. It's good seeing you again, and you, Bailey. So we've been working with the Michigan Soybean Committee on a project called the Michigan Advanced Biofuels Coalition. And this is basically a coalition of stakeholders, anywhere from energy producers to transporters to end users, and focused on promoting biodiesel, renewable diesel, and SAF.
Very good. Exciting stuff, and really excited to see the increased level of interest and activity in the state of Michigan, not only through MIABC, but also some legislation that's going to hopefully support, greater use of the fuels here in the Great Lakes state. So look forward to seeing where that goes.
Yeah, and I'll say the other thing is when we first started this project, we weren't really anticipating this, but it kind of makes sense when you think about Michigan being surrounded by water almost entirely, is that there's a lot of marine activity now. There's a lot of entering biodiesel as a direct replacement for regular petroleum diesel in marine applications. So we're excited to see where that goes too.
Yeah, that's exciting. I've lived here in the Motor City for over 30 years now, and certainly appreciate the lakes and the beautiful scenery and the northern Michigan charm that you really just got to see it to believe it. Another place that you don't always think about parks with so much is Chicago. But I have a daughter in Chicago now, and get out to visit her pretty frequently. And Pete, I know you wear another hat and working with the Chicago Park District as a consultant to them and helping them bring them on board with biodiesel. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came to be and Chicago Park District's use of the fuel?
Sure. Yeah, no, this is a pretty exciting program. This is, we're in actually the 10th year of running, it's a high blend biodiesel program, and it's It's operating in Chicago. There's a fueling site that's located on the south side. And it's exciting because we basically have 2 underground storage tanks, one that's got straight diesel and one that we receive pure biodiesel directly from the manufacturer. And so we've got a blending dispenser, and with that we can set the blend to whatever we want. And so when we started the program, really we were down around 10%, 15%. We kind of wanted to start slow and make sure that we didn't have any issues, and we did not. And so we increased the blends steadily. Over the course of a couple of years, we got to a B50 blend. And this is an unmodified equipment. We didn't have any cold flow issues because we were only doing these blends, during the summer and spring and fall. And so it's been a great program to show other fleets. Well, a lot of other fleets sort of draw the line at a B10 or a B20, but we're able to go to a lot higher blends. And, it's a wide range of different vehicles. We've got anything that you would normally see, doing landscaping type equipment. We've got tractors. We've got wood chippers. We've got riding lawnmowers. There's garbage trucks. There's forestry trucks. There's a lot of different types of vehicles, a wide range of vehicles that are using these higher blends. And not too long ago, a couple years ago, we got some money from the Illinois Soybean Association and American Lung Association in the form of a grant that allowed us to get an Optimus Technologies retrofit on some garbage trucks. And these are obviously trucks that see a lot of use, heavy duty trucks. And so we've been running B100 in those. We expanded the program to get 2 more garbage trucks and 3 forestry trucks. And so this really boosted our biodiesel blends to the point where, I guess, last year when we crunched the numbers, we used 60% biodiesel on average across the fleet that operates out of that fueling site on the south side. So pretty high blends, and we're just excited to keep moving forward with that program.
Yeah, that is outstanding. So, as the OEM market development manager, my role is to work with the different equipment manufacturers to foster their support for biodiesel blend use and renewable diesel in their vehicles. And really happy to say that over the last 20 plus years, we have gone from one OEM supporting B5 to pretty much every OEM now supporting at least B20 or higher blends without any modifications necessary in that equipment whatsoever. And many are, moving toward higher blend support, B30, B50, B100 as well. And as you mentioned, and the Chicago Park District fleet has proven out, you can go even up to a B30, B50 in that unmodified vehicle and have great success. So that's wonderful. Even in a place like Chicago, it can get pretty darn cold. and you've found a way to keep the fleet moving and getting its job done. So that's awesome. That Optimus Technologies that you mentioned from a company called Optimus that makes this vector system, basically a dual tank system that allows the vehicle to start and stop on diesel fuel. And once that engine warms up a little bit, it automatically switches over to biodiesel B100, runs the entirety of the duty cycle on that B100 and can cut your carbon upwards of 80 plus 90% and really, makes a substantial dent in those carbon emissions. So exciting to see how that's all come about. And on my side of the fence, it's really exciting to see how the OEMs are really seeing the value in the use of higher biodiesel blends and renewable diesel to help meet those, emissions reductions challenges. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Jen, that's something that thinking about this as you're discussing all the support that's come out from OEMs, that's something that early on when I started working with the B20 Club members, they really were preaching, we need OEM approvals just for B20. And now we've got so many OEMs out there that are supporting B20. They're like, well, what about B30? What about B50? What about B100? It's just fun to see over the last 10 years, of the B20 Club, how we went from basically, folks wanting B20 support, and now we have widespread support, and now they're pushing higher because they want to decarbonize. And to see all the work that you've done and the industry's done, folks like Scott Fenwick and Steve Howell have done to make sure that the fuel quality specs are what they are today, more stringent than diesel fuel. That's another thing that we can take back to potential fleet users and say, look, we've got mass support for B20 and we've got the best fuel quality specs out there. And that really resonates with a lot of fleet managers. And that's what helps make, support. That's what helps fleets like PepsiCo, make the decision to pilot B100. That would not have happened without all the work that you and the team did there at Clean Fuels. So thank you for all you've done. It's been great to see that, come about over the last 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, it's definitely been a journey, but I can say, working directly with our technical team, we are very diligent about getting in front of this stuff and working with the OEMs over the last, 20, 30 years to make sure that our fuels are fit for purpose in their engines. And, the quality improvements that have come along the way as we have further refined these ASTM fuel quality specifications over the years, like you said, really has helped to garner their confidence and support for the use of these biodiesel blends. And I would say now that they pretty much all agree that B20 is the floor. That's going to be the minimum of what fleets are wanting and expecting to use. Yeah. So we've been successful in getting, pretty much all of them on board with that. And now working with testing programs, research with them as they are developing these ultra low emissions diesel engines that are coming on board in 2027 to again make sure that our fuels are going to be fit for purpose in those engines. So it's definitely a team effort and one that, we couldn't do without the close collaboration with the OEM community for sure.
This is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
All right, welcome back. I'm Jennifer Weaver, and we're speaking today with Pete Probst and Bailey Arnold on all things Midwest biodiesel fleets. So, Bailey, last month, well, I guess back at the beginning of March, you and I had an opportunity to participate at something called the NTEA, again, the National Truck Equipment Association Work Truck Show and Green Truck Summit. Yeah. As we talked before, we get to chat with a lot of fleets at things like this and hear what messages really kind of resonate with them. And one that seems to be really resonating and making a whole lot of sense with them is a concept called the time value of carbon. Carbon reduction is really now driving the market, as we've talked, and electric vehicles just really aren't a viable option, at least in the near term, for heavier duty applications or off-road type applications where, EVs work a little bit better in a light duty space, for instance. So more and more fleets are starting to look at these, B20 and higher blends, as we said, with this time value of carbon concept in mind. So for our listeners that might not be as familiar with that, just kind of wanted to frame this out. And I thought you did a great job of explaining this too. So I'm going to have you pick up the baton here in a second too. But basically, as fleets and OEMs are thinking about this time value of carbon, they really need to evaluate emission reduction strategies from two different lenses. One is the amount of the reduction that they can achieve, but then the second is when it happens. And the reason that matters is because CO2, carbon dioxide, can remain in the atmosphere for anywhere from 300 to 1,000 years. It sticks around up there, just layering and layering and having a cumulative warming effect for our planet, which unfortunately we're seeing, some of the disastrous effects of that in terms of extreme weather and impacts on crops and human health. So, this is a big deal, and transportation and industry is largely to blame for the emissions that are going up into the atmosphere. Yeah. But if we think about the opportunity that it presents for us, any reduction that we can make in those CO2 emissions now can help us avoid decades of associated heating and have a lot more value than waiting another 10, 20 years to do something different. Mm-hmm. So that time value of carbon is key, and the next decade is really critical. And like I said, I thought you did a great job of kind of spelling this out for fleets when we were working with them at the Work Truck Show. So can you walk us through that example you provided?
Yeah, and I agree. I think this time value of carbon concept is really important when it comes to that hard to electrify sector. And I think that's the important thing first, is that we have to realize that we can't electrify everything overnight. And there are certain applications that will never electrify because it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for that application. And that's where it's really important to have fuels like biodiesel, renewable diesel that can step in and help. And so essentially what the time value of carbon says is that for every 5 years of delay, we'll have to reduce 13 times the emissions to have the same climate impact. So the same benefit to our climate in reducing those warming impacts. And so essentially what that says is that reducing a ton of CO2 today will provide a greater benefit to the planet and local communities than waiting for future transportation technologies to become available or even affordable. And so one of the examples that I give is that a typical over-the-road semi-tractor trailer covering a distance of 120,000 miles a year emits approximately 200 tons of CO2. And so that's with ultra low sulfur diesel fuel. If you were to switch to just a B20, so 20% biodiesel, you're going to get a 15% carbon reduction. And over a 10-year period, you're going to avoid 300 tons of carbon emissions. That's significant. But then when you think about B100 and the 74% or even higher carbon reduction that you can achieve with that fuel, over a 10-year period, you're going to save almost 1,500 tons of emissions. So you want to talk about a significant impact that you can make, again, overnight, and then extrapolate that out over a number of years, a decade. That's significant. And that's why PepsiCo, the Chicago Park District, Cook Illinois Corporation, and other groups out there, other fleets, are turning to B100 because they know that it's their decarbonization strategy for that hard to electrify sector.
Yeah, excellent. And yeah, when you think about 1,500 tons of carbon removed just from one vehicle, and then you've got fleets that have hundreds and hundreds of vehicles running every day over the road, that's a huge impact. And yeah, trailblazer fleets like PepsiCo running with B100 in their Frito-Lay and Pepsi trucks. Mm-hmm. What a great success story. And, like I said earlier with you, Pete, Chicago Park District really noticed that early. We're kind of an early adopter of this technology. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the evolution of decisions from, starting at a lower blend and working your way up, and maybe some lessons learned along the way, and any tips that you would give to fleet managers kind of considering their options for decarbonization?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm lucky to be working with the Park District because the leadership sees what's possible and what the opportunities are with biodiesel, and they say, yeah, go ahead and try it. Just don't break anything. It's kind of what they told me when I sort of took over the program. And so, we've tried not to break anything. I mean, there's been a lot of learning curves, but I think that, it takes, and looking back on it, we can say, the industry's been around a long time. You can say, yeah, it's just biodiesel. It's easy to do. But back then, we didn't really know. There wasn't a lot of other guidance for higher blends like that. And so the critical component was making sure that the fuel we received was high quality. And if you get high quality biodiesel from a reputable supplier, then you're not going to have any issues as long as you keep it clean. So that's the next part of it. You can get the fuel dropped off in perfect condition, but if you don't have the correct fuel handling or fuel maintenance procedures in place, and so that's where a lot of time went into making sure that we didn't have water in the fuel tanks, that we were doing fuel quality testing periodically to make sure that the fuel we received stayed good. And so, if you follow those procedures, then you're not going to have any issues. And so that's where, it's really showed the Park District, that this is what we can do. We didn't have to purchase any new equipment in terms of vehicles or, set up charging stations and work on different types of infrastructure. And so it was sort of a low barrier of entry to be able to achieve these high carbon emissions that we're getting out of this fleet. But then I think also besides the carbon emissions, the other point that's really important is that in the city of Chicago, we've got very high asthma rates. A lot of this is directly attributed to diesel emissions and other pollutants. And so we've seen a lot of direct effects of the biodiesel program, especially in the drivers. And so I remember we were doing a film one time, and one of the drivers that basically works it's a riding lawnmower. That's a diesel-powered riding lawnmower. And if you can imagine, just that's your 8-hour shift, is sitting on top of a diesel engine all day and breathing the exhaust. She said that she's got asthma, and she can tell the difference between when we first started the program, when we didn't have the biodiesel, she would have to wear a mask, and kind of have problems with breathing. But since we've been using the higher biodiesel blends, she doesn't wear a mask. She doesn't have any issues. And so it's a direct sort of effect to show that we are helping clean the air. We're working at the parks, which is on the lakefront and like some of the nicer parts of the Chicago area where people want to go and enjoy being outdoors and being in nature. And so biodiesel just really fits well with that whole theme of being outside and, breathing healthy air.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great. And such kudos to you and to the Chicago Park District fleet for realizing that would be a viable solution and being a pretty early adopter in that. So really great. Like I said, I enjoy getting out there and taking advantage of those beautiful parks along Lake Michigan and Chicago too. So that's great. I know that both you and Bailey have had the opportunity to work with a number of fleets in these B20 clubs in Indiana and Illinois. Bailey, would you want to highlight just a few of the other fleets that you've worked with,
Sure.
Through these programs, and maybe some of the the health impacts that they've been able to realize as a result of using biodiesel.
Yeah, so between Illinois and Indiana, we work with over 40 fleets that use B20 and higher blends of biodiesel, including blends like B30, B40, B100, as we've kind of talked about. And they've run the gamut from CityLink, which is mass transit in Peoria, Illinois, to Ozinga, a very large concrete and construction company in the Chicago area, to folks like the Village of Oak Park here in Illinois, to the city of Indianapolis, even Artco and Middle River Marine, which are vessel operators that run on B20 to B30 all year round. As Pete mentioned, that's a really new and emerging market for biodiesel and renewable diesel. And we have those examples already between Illinois and Indiana. And it's one of those things where I'm really honored to work with these fleets because these are cutting edge fleets. One of our fleets, the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County, GM actually came in and bought their Duramax diesels from them because they heard that they were running B20 and they wanted to run some tests on them to see what the effects of B20 were. And the story goes, the old fleet manager that I worked with, his name's John Walton, that shortly after they bought their engines and took a look at them, then GM came out with their B20 approval. So that's a pretty great story, and it shows the high level of the fleet participants that we have and just how proud, they are of their biodiesel usage and again, how proud I am to work with them. It's truly an honor. And one of the things that I do every year is collect their fleet data and their fuel usage data, and I quantify those emission reductions and provide a CO2 benefit and a health benefit. And so since 2014, when we launched the B20 Club of Illinois, and including data from the B20 Club of Indiana, which launched in 2020, we've provided over $31 million in health benefits just by using B20 and higher blends, drop-in blends of biodiesel. And that's in well over 4,000 vehicles. And on top of that, they've used 123.8 million gallons of B20 and higher blends. And that's provided a carbon reduction equivalent to planting more than 3.6 million trees. I mean, that's phenomenal just by doing a drop-in fuel. You don't have to change anything. There's no expensive equipment. You're just dropping in and going. And I mean, that is amazing. And that's why these fleet members that we work with are award-winning fleets. They're award-winning fleets, award-winning fleet managers, because they are the cream of the crop. And their first alternative fuel was biodiesel. And now they're excited to go higher. They're ready for B30, B40 for those that aren't doing it. And they're ready for B100. And that's where we need that OEM support to continue. And that's why I'm so excited to see all the work that's going on and all the progress that's happening. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you for working with DuPage County and having them work with GM. I guess I can't take all the credit for them going up to B20 then, huh? So, all right. I'll share that with you. Great work for sure. So Pete, I know that we're rounding things up here. If you could give one piece of advice to a fleet manager who is exploring various options to decarbonize their fleet, knowing kind of the questions that tend to circulate through fleet managers' heads, what would that advice be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that really anybody in the position to be able to purchase fuel for their fleet or purchase vehicles really needs to look at all their options in decarbonization. I think that some people think, if you're for biodiesel, you're against electric. We're not. I think there's a lot of different options that we all need to embrace to move forward and decarbonize this industry. But if you have a large diesel fleet, definitely biodiesel is a great first step. It doesn't have to be the last step. It could be a bridge to the next technology, and who knows how long and how wide that bridge is going to be. But definitely it hands down the cheapest and easiest low carbon fuel to implement today.
Excellent. Yeah, great points. Bailey, how about you? Any last pieces of advice for a fleet considering decarbonization options?
Well, I think Pete hit the nail on the head, but what I would add is that, some fleets don't consider the health and safety aspects of using, a fuel like biodiesel. It's biodegradable. It's non-toxic, at 100%. And it's something that you can implement again overnight. And it's something that's going to reduce the emissions in your community. It's going to help to lower the rates of asthma. It's going to help lower, those pollutants in their community. And it's something that they can do overnight. It's something that they can take to their community and say, look, we did this, and they can help others to do that as well. And, the more and more folks that we have doing that, the greater the health benefit that we're going to have for all of our communities across the country. We're starting here in Illinois and Indiana and Pete up in Michigan. And that's just the beginning. This is happening, all across the country. And I think this is a renaissance for the biodiesel and renewable diesel industry. And this is vitally important. And this is something that we need to keep telling, is this story that, you need to pick the technology and the fuels that work the best for your fleet. And while you're doing that, you can implement these fuels.
Excellent. Yeah, great comments. And, we're hoping to do some more of these fleet-focused stories. We've had New York City Fleet on a few weeks back. Coming up here soon, you're going to be hearing another episode with the city of Madison, Wisconsin. So stay tuned for that one. But for now, I think we're gonna wrap this one up and get back to our post here at the National Association of Fleet Administrators show this week. But I just wanted to really thank you guys again for taking time to join me today and sharing your experience and expertise with our listeners. And it's always a great time learning with you, talking with you, and sharing these good tips with our listeners and our fleets.
Yeah, thanks again, Jen, for having me. Really happy to be here and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Sounds great.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's great.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. And that's it for this week's episode. If you do enjoy this podcast and you've got a moment, it really does help us if you leave us a rating. It helps us grow and get more awareness. And if you really want to go for it, just leave us a review, like this one from Mad Hatter 64, who writes, "Love the podcast. Been listening since the first episode and haven't missed a week yet. I've been in the aviation industry for 22 years and would love to hear more information about sustainable aviation fuel." Well, Mad Hatter 64, thank you. And you've got it, I promise. More information in the coming weeks on SAF. And if you leave us a review, we might just read it here as well. So please go do that wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have any questions for our experts or suggestions for future topics or guests, you can email us at podcasts@cleanfuels.org. And join us next week for another episode of the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
Thanks for listening. Better, Cleaner, Now is a production of Clean Fuels Alliance America. Follow us at cleanfuels.org and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Clean Fuels Alliance America, visit us at cleanfuels.org.